What's going on? This Theo Gremminger, aka the OG Fantasy, talking about some fantasy sleepers. Last week, if you watched the fantasy sleepers video, you were loving life. We had a number of hits. The biggest one, of course, was Devon A-Chain. We begged you to add him last week. We begged you to trade for him. Sonic Truth podcast with the Podfather Matt Kelly, Alan Sislowski, and myself. We talked about A-Chain. I talked about him on the waiver wire column. I talked about him on this sleepers video as like an emergency guy, a little bit over our threshold we want to look for. Again, I want to focus on guys that are available in 75% of Yahoo leagues or more. But today and last week, I got to point out a couple guys a little bit over that threshold. Depending on your league size, you might be able to add them. So we had A-Chain last week, RB1 overall, not too bad. But we also really pounded the table for Tank Dell. He was my number one waiver wire recommendation last week, and he ended up with 145 receiving yards and a touchdown. Had a broken play where he scored a really long one on, but guys, those points count too, and opportunities matter, and Tank Dell's going to get a lot of them. And last week we had Luke Musgrave, who led Green Bay in targets, and he had a career-high 6 catches as our number one tight end recommendation. This week, it's pretty bone dry. I'll say this. I use Yahoo for my thresholds and my available players, and Yahoo managers, they added a lot of the correct players this week. There's not a whole lot of like meat on the bone, but we're going to find some players that can help you get through the week, some players that maybe I like a little bit more than the market. Let's talk about these fantasy sleepers. One quarterback that I want to start out with, and he's only available in 58% of Yahoo leagues, and that's CJ Stroud, but he should be available in a lot less leagues than this. CJ Stroud was just named Rookie of the Month in the AFC. First time a Houston Texan had received this award since 2017 with Deshaun Watson. CJ Stroud has not thrown an interception all season long. This guy looks like a bona fide franchise quarterback with big-time fantasy potential. Over the last 2 weeks, Stroud has passed for 662 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's avoiding sacks despite big-time problems on the Houston offensive line. Stroud is able to recognize blitzes. He's able to see the pass rush, and he's able to get the ball out. He's using players like Tank Dell and Nico Collins, who are both off to fast starts, as well as veteran Robert Woods. I really like CJ Stroud. I spent way too much fab on him in a couple leagues. I'll call myself out. I definitely bid against myself in a couple of leagues, but at the end of the day, I don't really care because I ended up with CJ Stroud. And this is a guy that I'm really happy about having as my quarterback 2, but I'm also going to put him in a few starting lineups, I'm sure, on a weekly basis. And I think by the end of the season, he might be a guy that we say, hey, guys, CJ Stroud's a quarterback 1. Put him in your lineup unless you have an elite option at quarterback. This is a guy who I think compares favorably in his career to a Kirk Cousins, and an upside comparison would be a Joe Burrow. I really believe that Houston drafted a real one in CJ Stroud, and I think we're going to see that this week. Pittsburgh's a big-time challenge for him. This is not an easy matchup at all, especially with the offensive line issues they have, but Houston's at home. CJ Stroud's red hot. They're going to give him opportunities to pass the ball. I'm excited about this one. For a quarterback that's available pretty much everywhere, this guy's available in 86% of Yahoo leagues, is Jimmy Garoppolo. We had concerns Jimmy Garoppolo was going to miss this week with an injury, but he is going to be back. He's playing. He's back at practice. And we don't love Garoppolo, but we like a couple things about this offense. They're incredibly consolidated. Over 70% of the pass attempts that Garoppolo has attempted this year have gone to Devontae Adams, who's playing exceptional football, and Jacoby Myers, who looks like one of the best free agent signings on the offensive side of the ball in football, along with David Montgomery, who, of course, went nuts last night on Thursday Night Football. So Garoppolo's passing the ball to players who are able to win. And what we really like about this matchup is the fact that he's playing the LA Chargers. The Chargers have been the most generous defense to opposing quarterbacks of anybody in the league right now. This is their passing totals they've given up. 367 yards last week to Kirk Cousins. Okay. 246 passing yards to Ryan Tannehill. And 246 to Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee's like giving up 350 to another quarterback. 466 to Tua Tagovailoa in week 1. So again, 367, 246, 466. We also have the fact that Garoppolo is coming off of a season high 324 passing yards last week against Pittsburgh. So Garoppolo's got a little steam going. The wide receivers are playing well, and he's got a tremendous matchup. I'm considering Garoppolo in a couple of leagues where I don't like my quarterback matchup. If you hate what you're staring at opposing you and you want to play the matchup, consider Garoppolo. Stranger things have happened. This game could be the sneaky 35-32 shootout, or it could be like what we saw last week with Minnesota, Los Angeles, a 28-24 type game. Any way you cut it, there's going to be points scored in this game, and that Chargers defense is one we really want to target with our opposing quarterbacks. If you want to go deeper and deeper and deeper, available in 98% of Yahoo leagues is Jameis Winston. It's the Jameis Winston revenge game, everyone. This is Jameis Winston against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers were the team that selected him first overall in the 2015 NFL Draft. Jameis Winston is probably going to approach this game with a sort of a game manager approach. The Saints have a very good defense. This is a divisional matchup. Bucs-Saints games are always tightly contested. But you know, and I know that Jameis is going to take a couple shots downfield. And with this team, he's got Chris Olave, he's got Rashid Shaheed, he's got a healthy Michael Thomas, and they have the return of Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara out of the backfield can always house one. This could be a low-key top 15 type performance from Jameis Winston. He's absolutely free. If you play DFS, you got to put together at least one Jameis Winston revenge game lineup. Running back is really dried up right now, but we're still going to look for a couple of plays that can really help us out. If you're in a very shallow league, or you happen to have this player on your bench, I am trying to cram Jaylen Warren in as many lineups as possible. Jaylen Warren's still available in 45% of Yahoo leagues. He's a player who has undeniable talent, really looks good with the football in his hands. In a split with Najee Harris right now, with Najee Harris receiving more touches on a weekly basis. But Warren has the juice in this backfield. And guys, we love the matchup. You know, we talked about Houston a little bit earlier, but Houston's been getting shredded by opposing running backs. Zach Moss had his big game against Houston. Baltimore Ravens ate up Houston. And even last week, Jacksonville found the end zone against Houston. So Houston's been very generous to opposing running backs. Houston's actually been very stingy against opposing wide receivers. They've only allowed one top 24 week to opposing wide receivers, but running backs have just been eating. So I'm looking to cram Jaylen Warren in a lot of lineups. Roschon Johnson, he's available in 48% of Yahoo leagues. Guys, this has got to be the Roschon Johnson game. This is a loser bowl in Soldier Field, must-win game for Matt Eberflus, must-win game for Sean Payton, for that matter. But you've got these two teams facing off against one another. Broncos are a favorite, a slight favorite on the road. It seems like a game where points are going to be scored. Roschon Johnson, if you're struggling at the RB2 spot, you're looking for an upside flex, go with Roschon Johnson. A little more shallow, but still a shallow league, is Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell is available in 58% of Yahoo leagues. Huge favorites, 49ers. They're huge favorites on the road. You also have the fact that Deebo Samuel looks like he's going to miss the game. I think they're going to lean a little bit more on their running backs. Christian McCaffrey has been fantastic, dynamic. Like, if we're relitigating redraft, Christian McCaffrey is a locked-in top 3 pick, and you can make an argument to take him number 1 overall just because of such struggles we've seen from the early running backs drafted this year compared to McCaffrey. But they want to keep McCaffrey fresh. In weeks 1 and 2, they kind of ran McCaffrey into the ground. Last week against the Giants, they said they wanted to get Elijah Mitchell more touches, and they absolutely did. Mitchell had 3 catches, and his best game of the year running the ball. He had 42 yards rushing. This week, I think, could be a lot larger. I expect San Francisco to be in control, especially by the second half. I think we see a ton of Elijah Mitchell all second half. He's a threat to find the end zone, and he's also a threat to catch a couple of balls. I think he's a dark horse to finish as an RB2 this week. I think San Francisco could have 2 guys finish inside the RB2 line. Shallow league ad. This guy's available in 74% of Yahoo leagues. It's a gross one. Matt Breida. Giants have a winnable game against Seattle. It's a tilting game for Brian Dable. Tilting game for Daniel Jones. Saquon's going to miss again, it looks like. Matt Breida is the safer bet to lead the Giants in backfield touches. He was completely bailed out by a touchdown last week, caught a couple of balls, did not look good. Listen, guys, I don't know your desperation level, but this running back position is dried up. And if I'm looking for a guy that I can eke out 10 points and I need 10 points to win the week from my RB2 spot, I might throw Matt Breida in there, hold my breath, close my eyes, maybe stream something on Netflix during the game, look at the box score at the end, and hope that maybe he fell in the end zone. This one I'm not excited about, but bear in mind, Matt Breida might be starting again. I'll throw out Tyjae Spears. I think that I talk about Tyjae Spears more than any player in football in all of my articles, all of my video content. But Tyjae Spears has now outsnapped Derrick Henry 2 out of 3 games. You can say, Theo, the game flow was there. Cleveland was killing him. Of course, they have the pass catching back. But hey, guys, we've seen Tennessee in years past when they're trailing still try to impose their will on people with the running game. It hasn't happened this year. They've been turning to Tyjae Spears. He's explosive. He can catch the ball. I think a big game is coming. And even if you disagree with me, he's still available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. That's way too many. Treat him as a very high-end handcuff who might earn a role. The situation is not completely unlike Jalen Warren last year with Najee Harris, where he starts seeing a little more work in the second half of the season. And a bull case would be, this is Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott again. I don't think it's quite there, but I do believe in the talent of Tyjae Spears. I want to roster him wherever I can. Speaking of rostered, if you have a league with secondary waivers, see if you can't add Keaton Mitchell from Baltimore. This is a guy that I've recommended in my waiver wire column a couple times now. He's starting to be a popular name. A couple of big accounts are starting to talk about Keaton Mitchell. Hey, if you watch Player Profiler and you listen to our shows, you've seen Billy Muzio and I talk about Keaton Mitchell more than a few times for like a month now. So 6 weeks now. We talked about Keaton Mitchell in the summer. So it's nice to see everybody else kind of catching up here with Keaton Mitchell. Grab him and stash him if you can. Another running back that's going to be available in a ton of leagues is Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard's available in 77% of Yahoo leagues. Definitely the handcuff back in Carolina to Miles Sanders. But Miles Sanders was dealing with a pec injury. Now he's dealing with a groin injury. Miles Sanders has been a productive player for us. Nothing exciting, but he's been providing double-digit PPR points. He's been used quite well. But when these injuries start adding up, and it's multiple injuries, you've got to take note. Not recommending that you shove Chuba Hubbard in your lineups this week, but absolutely he's a guy that I want to stash and see where this goes. If Miles Sanders misses time, Chuba Hubbard is a back-end RB2, high-end RB3, a guy we can put in the flex spot. He can catch the ball. Not an exceptional talent, but a player that Carolina trusts and would lean on. Another running back that I really want to stash more than start this week is Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller is available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. We talked about Alvin Kamara when we talked about Jameis a little bit earlier with quarterbacks. Kendre Miller, treat him as a high-end handcuff with the chance to be a handcuff plus. I don't think they want to run Kamara into the ground. I think that Kamara, they want to utilize out of the backfield, get him in space, catching the ball, get him some carries, but they want to have another back involved. And with Jamal Williams out of the picture, Kendre Miller is appealing. Miller was kind of disappointing last week. He had 9 carries. He had 1 catch, but didn't really accumulate any yardage. But I do believe in the talent. This was a 3rd-round pick. We liked him at Player Profiler. We have him up there in our Dynasty rankings pretty aggressively. So we believe in Kendre Miller's profile. You should want Kendre Miller on your bench. He's depth for you now, but if Kamara misses some time, Miller could be very, very interesting. Let's move over to the wide receiver position, and I'll send out an emergency PSA. This is emergency. Pay attention. Of anything I've said on this whole video, this is the biggest takeaway. If you can get Marvin Mims, add him. He's available right now in 61% of Yahoo leagues. If you can get Marvin Mims, add him. Add Marvin Mims, add Marvin Mims, add Marvin Mims. If he's already rostered in your league, consider trading for Marvin Mims. People know Marvin Mims is talented, but they might still be open to moving him. The usage has not really been there. He's been sort of a part-time player that's made a couple of big plays. 2 weeks ago, he had 2 catches. Houses one goes over 100 yards. Last week, he has another strong week. Sees 5 targets only, but he has 2 big kickoff returns, including one he took to the house when Denver got rolled by Miami. Marvin Mims is the biggest takeaway here. Add Marvin Mims, get Marvin Mims. If you're a dynasty manager, consider trading up for Marvin Mims. I think the breakout happens against Chicago. I think it could be really like a bold, like statement type game for Marvin Mims this week, kind of like what we saw from Tank Dell last week. And if it doesn't happen this week, I think it will happen soon. Over the second half of the season, we're going to have Marvin Mims in our starting lineup every single week. You also have the chance that Denver moves on from Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton. If Marvin Mims is an every down wide receiver, he's in our lineup every week. He's dynamic, he's explosive, he's electric. Marvin Mims is a really, really good football player. I'm so excited to see where this heads for him. Get Marvin Mims if you can. Another wide receiver that is available 67% of Yahoo leagues. So still available in a lot of them is Rashee Rice. Last week, Rashee Rice had his most productive game of the season. We all saw him catch the touchdown in week 1 against Detroit. Last week, he had a touchdown overturned. If he would have just caught that touchdown with the rest of his production, he would have been a much, much more added waiver wire ad this week. But I think he's kind of falling through the cracks. A lot of these wide receivers kind of fell through the cracks this week because Tank Dell, Marvin Mims, a couple of these other players were just so excited. Oh, Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnson in a lot of leagues. A lot of these guys were just added. But Rashee Rice, Adam. Let's quickly touch on these Los Angeles wide receivers. Absolutely add these guys if you can. It's a great opportunity. Justin Herbert is playing better than pretty much anybody in football right now at the quarterback position for fantasy. I just didn't really touch on them because I figured these guys are already rostered in your leagues. Both of these guys are going to be over 65% rostered on Yahoo. Not really the kind of guys I talk about on the Sleeper Show. So a lot of sleeper articles you're reading about this week or watching sleeper videos on other sites. They're going to talk about Palmer and Quentin Johnson. You watch Player Profile. These guys are not sleepers to you. This is not a sleeper situation to you. But yeah, sure. Add them if they're available in your league. Deeper cut. Available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. Throwback. The next two names I'm talking about, I feel like I'm in a time machine and I got zapped back to 2020. Michael Gallup. Gallup had his best performance since 2021 last week. He had 6 catches for 92 yards in Dallas's loss to Arizona. It's a weird game. Dallas has offensive line concerns. They're going up against Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. A lot of times you'll have some sort of a funnel when you're playing Belichick and some random player will end up getting the production. I think that New England, if I was coaching them, I would try to take away CeeDee Lamb as much as possible. I also would not want to let Tony Pollard get loose in space. So I'm not sure how Bill Belichick is going to approach this game defensively, but I could see Michael Gallup being the one who has the advantageous matchups. Dak Prescott has familiarity with him. I could see him having another usable week. We're not going crazy here, but if you're looking for wide receiver 3 production, maybe an interesting flex, Michael Gallup could get you there. Another player who I'm a little bit surprised was not added in more leagues was DJ Chark. DJ Chark had 11 targets last week. 11 targets for DJ Chark last week. He had 86 yards and a touchdown. He had one really long touchdown. I think it went for about 47 yards, 45-yard touchdown catch. It was Adam Thielen and Chark last week just looking great with Andy Dalton. Not unfortunate for Carolina fans, but unfortunate for us as fantasy managers. It looks like it's going to be Bryce Young back under center this week. Bryce Young, I think he'll be fine in his career, but he's not as much of a gunslinger as the Red Rifle. But DJ Chark is still a guy that I want on my team. Jonathan Mingo's out with a concussion. This could be a fun consolidated target share with Thielen and Chark for Carolina. Winnable matchup against Minnesota. We saw how good those Los Angeles receivers, namely Keenan Allen, were last week. DJ Chark could be a sneaky wide receiver 3 this week. One guy who's available in 91% of Yahoo leagues right now that I think is super interesting and kind of sliding through the cracks under the radar is Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore was a guy that a lot of waiver wire columns, I know I was writing about him last year, a lot of sleeper columns last year he popped up on, and he had a number of interesting usable games last year with Kyler Murray. We had Rondale Moore in our flex spots for a few weeks last year. So he's a guy who's flashed. This is a high draft capital guy, a fast guy, a diminutive wide receiver, but always pretty explosive, kind of ignored by drafters this year as Arizona looked like it was going to be a complete train wreck. Arizona's a little bit better than we thought. Josh Dobbs is a little bit better than we anticipated. But what's exciting about Rondale Moore is last year, Cliff Kingsbury would give him these like wide receiver sweeps, and you'd see rush attempts from Rondale Moore, but it was never like that creative. It was like kind of like by the numbers. They'd line Rondale Moore up in the slot, maybe give him some sort of a sweep, and mostly it was low ADOT pass attempts, and he would try to get some yak after it, and nothing too creative. Even though Cliff Kingsbury had this big like offensive genius profile, we never really saw it. But now you have Drew Petzing, who is the offensive coordinator in Arizona, and he's gushing over Rondale Moore. You can Google it. The guy's got a lot of quotes out there, thinks he's a dynamic player, thinks he's a big-time talent, and they've actually put Rondale Moore in like a wide receiver running back hybrid role. And they're actually lining him up at running back, like a traditional running back formation. They'll put Rondale Moore out there. It's kind of like 2021 Deebo Samuel, but in a much, much smaller version and in a much, much worse offense. Definitely not 2021 Deebo production, but think about the way Deebo Samuel was used in 2021 on traditional handcuffs, traditional handoff plays. And that's what we saw with Rondale Moore last week. Rondale Moore had 54 yards rushing and a touchdown, and they came on carries from the running back position. He still had 4 receptions and 6 targets as well. He didn't have any yardage out of them. They were like, real dump offs. He gets tackled, but you still bank the 4 points right there in PPR. He's super interesting right now. I think this offense is limited. Hollywood Brown took a knock this week. I think Hollywood Brown will play, but again, he's a little bit banged up. I'm interested to see where this Rondale Moore situation heads. He's a guy that I'm going to try to put on a lot of benches of mine this week, but I think he could be a thing this year. And if I'm wrong, it's not going to cost you anything. This is a guy you're going to get for 1% fab in a lot of leagues. A lot of leagues right now, you can just go to your free agent pool and click add, and you'll have Rondale Moore. So let's see where this goes with Rondale Moore. We got to talk about Josh Downs. Josh Downs is a guy that I'm very high on. I talked about him on my waiver wire video as well as my waiver wire column. Josh Downs had 12 targets last week. He has 24 targets on the year. He's never had less than 5 targets. Josh Downs has been kind of making a living out of the slot, low ADOT throws from both Anthony Richardson and also Gardner Minshew the last 2 weeks. But I think Josh Downs is a thing. He was the 3rd round selection of the Colts. This is a guy that had like a connection with Anthony Richardson this summer. Apparently they clicked. They were like, working with one another on routes and getting some extra reps in after practice and in mini camps. So there's some sort of connection there with Anthony Richardson. Obviously, Minshew liked him as well. 12 targets in your 3rd game in the league is really like, I know Indianapolis is limited at the wide receiver position in terms of the amount of players they have there and the talent they have at the position. But to get 12 targets in your 3rd game and a game you won on the road in Baltimore, I think Josh Downs is really sliding under the radar. I think he's a true sleeper this week. And I think he's a little bit more than some, catch the ball and fall down type slot receiver. I think Josh Downs has some big playability in him. This is a guy in 3 years at UNC had 22 touchdown catches. Now, bear in mind, he was catching the ball from Sam Howell and Drake May. Drake May will be a 1st round pick this year. Sam Howell's a starting quarterback in the NFL right now, but he was the preferred target of both. And Josh Downs had a reputation as an explosive player. He had a very high vertical leap at the combine, ran well in the 40. He's an athletic player who's getting targets, and he's ascending in Indianapolis. I think Josh Downs is a guy who needs to be added everywhere you can. He's a great consolation prize if you didn't spend the fab this week and you missed out on guys like Tank Dell, you missed out on guys like Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston, you missed out on Marvin Mims, but you still want to add a wide receiver with upside. It's Josh Downs. I think you've already seen his floor. I think there's some upside with him. Let's add him and see where this goes. And then if I'm really throwing darts, I'm in a really deep league and I want to play a matchup. I'm looking at 2 New York Giant wide receivers, Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson. Slayton has had at least 5 targets in all 3 games. He's done nothing with them. Last year, Slayton was a guy who fantasy managers had a little bit of success with. He had a decent season, especially because he was a guy that wasn't drafted. You got him for free, but he's getting targeted every single game. And again, Seattle just got burned by Adam Thielen and DJ Shark. I think this could be and then Seattle also had a game where they got burned by Josh Reynolds of Detroit recently. So like Darius Slayton, this could be a Darius Slayton long touchdown type game. He could slide into wide receiver 3 land this week. I wouldn't bet on it, but if I'm desperate, consider Slayton. And then maybe the better long-term ad and a guy who came back from injury last week, but it was very quiet because New York got beat up against San Francisco as expected. But Wan'Dale Robinson is the kind of guy who could be a target earner on this team. Last year, his trajectory was pointing up as the season moved along, and then he unfortunately got injured. So keep an eye on Wan'Dale Robinson as a long-term ad and Darius Slayton as a guy where I'm going to throw him in the flex. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to pray that I get a long touchdown. Desperation it can lead you to do some interesting things in fantasy football, but at least with Slayton, we know that he saw at least 5 targets every game, and we know that he's facing a team that's given up some big wide receiver performances to players that we really don't think had it in them. So again, Josh Reynolds, DJ Shark, Adam Thielen all had really big games against the Seattle secondary. And we're not even mentioning the fact that in week 1, this was the Puka Nacua breakout game. This was the Tutu Atwell breakout game. So like wide receivers have been eating against Seattle every single week. It could be one of these New York Giants wide receivers. It could be Darren Waller, but some New York Giant receiver is going to have a game. So take a shot, guys. Tight end wise, very short list. We talked about Luke Musgrave on this video before. We've talked about guys like Zach Ertz. They're all rostered right now. I want to focus on one tight end. So your league went nuts if Josh Palmer was available. Your league went crazy if Quentin Johnston was available. Trying to add the wide receiver to replace Mike Williams was something that logically fantasy managers spent fab on this week. But I think there's a scenario where Josh Palmer managers and Quentin Johnston managers are very disappointed on Sunday because Gerald Everett has a really big game and has like a sneaky top 5 tight end finish against the Las Vegas Raiders. Gerald Everett had a lot of success last year, his first year attached to Herbert. They bring him back this offseason. Really quiet first 2 weeks, but last week he had 6 targets, 6 catches. Didn't do a whole lot on the yardage end, but again, 6 targets, 6 catches for a tight end. That's good. And I think Everett could end up kind of bouncing back and becoming a guy that we want to, maybe shove into our lineups, depending on our tight end situation. He could be a low-end tight end 1 moving forward. He's available in 68% of Yahoo leagues. And then if I'm in a deep format, and I'm speaking to you FFPC drafters who are in tight end premium, Donald Parham is available in a ton of leagues right now. We don't want to pay up for Donald Parham, but last week he did have 2 touchdown catches, and the routes run are creeping up, and actually the snaps were close to Gerald Everett last week. So it was like 38-34 on the snaps. Parham is a giant of a human. He's like 6'8", one of the biggest tight ends in football. I should say tallest tight ends in football. He's a former basketball player, former XFL player. And if he has a growing role, then forget everything I said about Everett. But I think the logical bet is Gerald Everett sees a much larger role. Donald Parham could be a red zone threat. Tight end premium managers should make sure they add Donald Parham. Again, I'm Theo Gremminger. I'm going to bring you this Sleepers video every single week. If you like to read this sort of content, or you want a little bit more in-depth analysis, look for my Sleepers column to drop every single Friday or Saturday on playerprofiler.com. I hope you have a great week of football. Stick with us at Player Profiler. All kinds of great shows to help you out, all kinds of great videos to help you out, all kinds of great articles over on the site. We've got you covered. We want to see you win. Let's go get some W's this weekend. It's week 4. Let's go.